August 11th. This is a Wisconsin Rapids Legislative Committee. I think what we'll do is start across the room and make our introductions. So,
Ryan Austin, District 1 Alderman.
Dean Veneman, District 2 Alderman.
Matt Zacher, District 3 Alderman.
Tom Rayom, District 4 Alderman.
Jennifer Gossick, City Clerk.
Sue Schill, City Attorney.
Dennis Pollock, number 6 Alderman.
Jay Bemke, Committee Member.
Shane Blazer, Mayor.
Item number 1, call the meeting to order at 4:02. Item number 2, consider for adoption an ordinance revising the role and responsibilities of the Park and Rec Commission as recommended by the Park and Rec Ad Hoc Committee and the Park and Rec Commission. Sue?
Not on here. Okay, so this is the proposed recommended ordinance that was the result of the meetings of the ad hoc committee, which included two alder persons. I think it was Mr. Bemke, Mr. Rayom, Park and Rec Commission members, including the mayor. And then this was then approved by the Park and Rec Commission at its meeting. So now this is going to go to the council for approval. I don't know if any of you have any questions on it or if you want me to kind of go through it. It's mostly, there's some cleanup and then basically a more specific language on what the commission does and what is in their control without council approval, or what things are they advisory on that would go to the council. So we tried to think of as many different responsibilities and roles as possible to anticipate any issues.
Yeah, and I guess also, so, the financials are still controlled by the council in the sense that, they submit a budget to you, and then that budget is approved, and if they want to spend money on something that's not budgeted, it would go through the same process with finance and property than the council for approval. I do believe there was a nominal amount put in there as kind of, I guess, undeclared or not designated kind of some funds. So if they had a little project that they wanted to do in the parks, or if the park and rec director had, or the buildings and grounds supervisor has an idea, that then they could just go ahead and do it. Sue, do you remember that amount?
Yeah, it's $25,000. It's at the top of page 4.
Yeah. And their funding source does come mainly from room tax for park improvements. I forgot the percentage. And Tim just told me today. It's 18.75, I think. But so the council would still have oversight over the finances.
Committee, any questions? Nothing. Ryan?
I'll move to approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 3, consider for adoption an ordinance which would change standing committee secretary positions to vice chairperson positions. Again, Attorney Schill.
Actually, I think this is maybe a suggestion by the mayor, but
Right.
which I am in agreement with, that instead of having secretaries, which the vast majority of committees, if not all, really they each have a department head that's probably handling the minutes and doing the notices and such, and so not really doing too much secretarial duties, but to have somebody be a vice chair in the event that the chair is not present at the meeting, so that then they're not scrambling to determine who should be the chair in that instance. So just thinking that a vice chair would be appropriate rather than a secretary. And then I guess whether the current secretaries would then automatically become vice chairs, I guess could be part of the, an additional part of adopting the ordinance if that's the route you want to go.
Okay. I guess just one question. If we do this, Sue, are we going to have to do anything else? It being that we already have secretaries?
I guess I'm not sure your question. I mean, because we have secretaries, so the secretaries would automatically become vice chairs.
That was my question.
Yeah. And I think maybe you just follow up your adoption of the ordinance with probably another motion that would clean it up, that would say that all secretaries are now vice chairs. I know there is something regarding pay for certain offices, and I cannot find that in the ordinance, and I don't know if that is something that was a policy, because I think certain officers get certain stipends each month, right? Like a chair gets, and I think a secretary gets an amount, and so I guess that'll probably need to be addressed, but I could not find anything in the ordinance that actually provided for those amounts, so that might have been just a rule of the council unless someone can find it in the ordinances. So I don't know how you feel about that, if the vice chair gets that amount or there is no secretary stipend then. And I don't even know the amount, $5, $10, $15, something like that.
I think the secretary gets 5. Yeah, it's either 5 or 10.
Uh-huh. And then what do the chairs get?
I think the chairs get 15.
Oh,
That seem right?
so you're buying next time, Bemke.
All right.
So, yeah, like I said, I would have addressed that ordinance in terms of the pay, but I could not find anything, so there has to be something somewhere that sets that, so I guess that's another issue that's potentially out there regarding pay, but an alternative would be to just have them be vice chair / secretary and then continue the, but then they're recognized as the officer that then steps in if the chair is not available, and then I guess you could still get your $5, but.
Committee, any questions? Matt?
I guess I didn't hear, or I wasn't listening. If I hear, what was the reason for wanting to change this?
There's because we don't have secretaries back in the day. Tom probably remembers also that the secretaries of the committees took the minutes. And I know when I was the clerk, some of the secretaries would handwrite the minutes and submit them to the clerk's office, and we would type them out. But now that we have staff people doing that, so the necessity for a committee to have a secretary probably isn't necessary, and more so, we run into once in a while if the chair's gone from a meeting, it would be good to kind of point out to have who the vice chair would be should the chairperson not be there.
Okay, thanks.
But there's no purpose to have a secretary anymore, unless you want to go back to doing your own minutes.
Ryan, anything?
No, I mean, I think we encountered this with planning commission, right? So I think it makes sense to call the secretary out as the vice chair. If it makes things easier to go secretary / vice chair, I'd be for that as well.
Tom or Dennis, anything else to add? Dennis?
Well, thank you. I think it's a good move. If nothing else, why wouldn't the third person just become the secretary then? I would think the only time you'd have to take minutes would be if you went to closed session and the staff would not be attending that meeting. But other than that, I go along with changing it to vice chair instead of secretary.
Matt?
In that case, though, we'd have to pay them like $2.50 or something. So.
So to me, I think the secretary/vice chair covers that issue. Unless the vice chair is chairing the meeting, then you have that caveat, right?
Oh, but again, because the secretaries aren't taking notes, they really don't have a role on the committee, so.
Well, like Dennis brought up, closed session would be one area there where if staff wasn't able to be in on that meeting, somebody would have to take minutes.
I don't know, does that happen? I don't know if that's ever happened. Because usually the city attorney has done that also, has taken notes down or, yeah.
So I'd make the motion to pass it as changing it from secretary to vice chair. I don't see a need to make the third person the secretary. And I think the staff do a good job at taking notes. I think it's just our due diligence to make sure that the notes correlate with, what we decided in the meetings.
So you
So I
want,
make that motion.
the motion is just vice chair, not vice chair/secretary?
That's my motion, yeah.
Okay. The motion on the floor, is there a second? I'll second it. There's a motion on the floor. There's been a second. All those in favor say aye.
I
Opposed?
Nay.
Ayes have it, 2-1. Moving on to item number 4, consider for adoption an ordinance which provides for a revocation of a retail alcohol license if the license is not used for a period of 4 months.
So this is something that the clerk and I have talked about on occasion where we don't really have a mechanism if someone has renewed a license or, currently has a license, that if they go out of business or, something happens to the business and they're closed, that could be trigger a revocation, and I think it's something that's needed in our ordinance, especially when we're dealing with quotas and that we only have a certain number of them. It's best to have those returned or surrendered or revoked, basically, in the event that they're needed for another premises. So this is pretty common in other cities, and it just basically requires that you have to, continually operate, obviously, the business that you have the license for, and if you don't for 4 months, that could be basically grounds for revocation. That doesn't mean that if there's a situation where maybe there's a fire or something and, it's going to take them more than 4 months to get going, it doesn't mean that we're automatically going to revoke them. It's still up to the council to determine when you want to proceed with a revocation, but it is a reason to revoke specifically if you don't use the license for 4 months. And that this is just simply calling it out in both the fermented malt beverage chapter of our ordinance and then the intoxicating liquor ordinance.
Mayor?
Yeah, I strongly support this. And I experienced it for 8 years as the clerk. Business closed, we only have a finite number of these licenses. And if you close your business and you can sit on that license till the next renewal time, you're potentially hindering from somebody else from economic development or creating and starting a business. And I just think it's fair. 4 months is more than fair. If you're going to decide to reopen your business, you have that time. But to just tie up a license when you only have a finite number of them, it's not fair, and it doesn't create a level playing field. Thank you.
Committee, any comments or questions?
How often have we run into this issue, roughly?
Well, we actually, the situation that I'm thinking of is actually when we had granted a license to someone that said they were going to open a business and then never did and tried to sit on it for quite a while. So that was a number of years ago. Trying to think I don't think there's been anything real recent. But I'm sure there's been a couple of instances in the last 5, 7 years where this would have been, come in handy just to make them, either surrender or do something with their business, so.
And it happens, can't think of specifics, but I know there was several times where there was a license just sitting there for a location that was not operating. And we've had, I don't know if in Jennifer's time, if there's been waiting lists, but I know when I was here, we had waiting lists for license with people hoping that a license would open.
I'd say I share your sentiment. There, as you mentioned, there's a limited number of these licenses that we can issue, and if somebody's gonna, potentially sit on it and not do anything with it, I think we should have a little say in that, and I think 4 months is plenty of time, so I'm gonna make a motion to approve the ordinance. So revocation of retail alcohol license if the license is not used for a period of 4 months.
Matt, comment?
Just curious on the 4 months, was that, if somebody closes their business, they kind of know right away. So why give them that much time unless they come up with a plan that says, this is my plan and I'm going to be up and running in 3 months or 5 months or something, and give them that leeway or something. But just curious where the 4 months came from.
I think just looking at other cities, and actually, I would say it was common to have 6 months, actually. So the 4 months, I guess I thought was, I agree that it should be more aggressive than 6 months. I thought 4 months, but, there's nothing magical about the number other than just looking at other municipalities and, what they're doing. So I can't say that 90 days is, or 3 months isn't unreasonable, but I don't know, Jennifer, if you.
We have had a situation recently where the establishment was being built, and we granted the license based on them opening by a certain date, and then this was due to COVID, but it was several months before they were able to even open, but they did open within 4 months. So I think 4 months is not unreasonable. We are currently sitting right now, we have quotas on our Class B licenses, both for the intoxicating liquor. And we have 41 licenses available, and we are at 40 that have been issued. But there have been times in the past where we are at our quota, as Mayor Blazer was talking about, and we had 2 or 3 businesses wanting to open, but we didn't have any licenses available. And so if somebody is sitting on a license because they're not open, then I support this. So
You support the 4 months?
I do. I think that's reasonable. I think, if somebody is opening a business and they're waiting for building permits or they're waiting for whatever, I think that gives them plenty of time to get it taken care of.
Yeah.
I think 6 months is a long time, but I think 4 months is reasonable.
I just think 4 is long for somebody who isn't going to use it. If they know, I guess my hope is they wouldn't play games. If they know they're not going to use it, they're going to turn it in. But so I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any more comments or questions, discussion? Dennis or Tom? If not, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 5 is discuss rules of common council specifically relating to the use of video conferencing for standing committee, common council, and other committee meetings.
Yes, that's me again.
Okay.
We've been having questions about, are we going to continue indefinitely using Zoom for our common council and standing committee meetings? Is it, will it be appropriate in the future for governing body members to appear via Zoom, and will that count as a quorum? And so I guess I wanted to start the conversation of your thoughts and in terms of whether this Zoom or, video, audio appearance by I guess the first thing would be appearance by a governing body member, whether you would consider that to continue to be appropriate. Right now, we don't have a policy specifically stating this. We're kind of going off of in the pandemic era and the guidance that was given by the state regarding open meetings and in the pandemic and basically recognizing that it's common and it's necessary and it's reasonable to do that. But now that we're still in the pandemic, but I guess in the future, is that something, if we want to continue to do that, I would suggest that we have a specific policy or rule stating that it is appropriate for members to appear by Zoom. And then the other part of that is, are we going to continue to have the Zoom set up that Tyler's doing where people can call in or Zoom in, or is our Facebook Live is on TV, is that enough to, that we're not going to need to do that for them, but still it could be a choice for, as I said, the governing body members to use, or perhaps a presenter or someone that had an item on the agenda could possibly do that for convenience. So I think Jennifer had handed out basically a remote appearance, something very simple, basically saying whether or not you are okay with governing body members appearing, either telephonic or by video conferencing, and then that person counts as towards a forum. They vote just like any other time. And is that something that you would like to consider doing or not? We're requiring everyone to be in person in only limited circumstances or more restrictive circumstances to allow governing body members to appear. I would say, in talking to other municipalities, I would say what I have here is a very simple, that they're recognizing, allowing members to appear by Zoom, but they're generally not, well, I shouldn't say they're generally not, some are not continuing it for the public and are relying on other means to, that the public can attend in person, or the other forms that we have, like Facebook and the TV. So, but I would say a lot of them are kind of going away from allowing everyone to Zoom in, the public to Zoom in, and are restricting it more towards just governing body members and maybe staff and maybe, people that are presenting. So that's kind of, so the first paragraph is basically talking about that it would be okay. It does say with consent of the presiding officer, that's something that you could or couldn't have. It could just be an automatic that it's okay to do. You don't need anyone's permission. And then the second point there is, are we going to continue Zoom video conferencing if you're going to do it for the governing body, for the general public, and then, allowing staff or other persons on the agenda. So that's kind of the issue, just to generate some discussion, and I can come up with a rule specific to it, similar to this, or if you don't want to continue with this technology.
Matt?
Do we have someone here that's in charge of running the Zoom and kind of get their input on it? Would you care to share, Tyler?
Howdy. Yeah, so for actually administrating the Zoom meetings is not that a ton of work. We just have to, be here. We don't have a ton of members, or haven't had in the past, a ton of members from the public actually join our Zoom meetings. So preference would be, from my chair, would be to have Zoom available for aldermen or people, that are a part of the meeting to present that might be remote, or city staff, that might be on vacation or something that need to be in the meeting as well. But by request, not a every meeting needs to have a Zoom component to it. So that would be my preference, if, yeah, by appointment or by request only. Yep.
Anything else, Matt? Mayor?
Yeah, I agree with Tyler. I think it's important that council persons have that option should they not be able to be present for a committee or council meeting, or if we can save money by not bringing an out-of-state presenter here to present. But I think that it's not just automatically set up, and that it's just more of a requested item to request to be able to have a Zoom option for council or presenter. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I agree with what the mayor and Tyler said, except for the part about the public. I feel like it's been pretty seamless with Zoom. I don't think we have too many issues. I think giving the opportunity to somebody that really has a strong opinion about something that we may be discussing, that may not be able to make it in person, whether they're ill or whatever the case may be. I think it's a great thing to be able to offer to the public. So I guess I see it a little bit differently when it comes to keeping it open in that sense. So
Ryan, I don't believe, Tyler, correct me, we do not let the public freely enter our Zoom. They're usually, like, if we know somebody's requesting to come by Zoom, we'll let them in.
appointment? Yep.
But we don't just, if somebody wants to Zoom into our Zoom, we don't just automatically let them in usually, do we?
We do. We just mute all participants by default, and we don't really necessarily open up communication for Zoom participants to have. And again, since we've started this, I can count on two hands on how many people we've actually had enter a Zoom for our meetings that was a member of the general public that didn't actually have, an agenda item on to speak to. Again, if that were the case, I would gladly, again, open up a Zoom meeting if there was someone that reached out to an alderman that said, hey, I would really like to speak to this. Can I have some time, prior to the meeting, to have that option? So, yeah.
I would just fear that if it's not something that's listed on our public meeting notice, that folks might not realize it's an option.
Anybody else?
Yeah. I just don't see the need for it. I'm still about in person. I think it's fine to let the public in. I'm the opposite. I'm concerned about having committee members and governing members on Zoom. I don't think it's hard to understand what people are saying if you're watching it online. It's hard to see if you're watching it on TV. It's hard to, I think, giving, talking through Zoom as a committee member, especially at a council meeting. I think, yes, if there's a specific thing we by appointment, I can understand. If someone's out of town for 3 weeks, so a council member, and they want to be on. But I think as a rule, just as an example, the other day at the Parks and Rec, we had 2 people on Zoom that were committee members that didn't have their cameras on. I never heard whether they voted or not. I don't even know that they were there. Now, I know this said with the cameras on, but I still think it's our responsibility to the public to be in person and to be here. And if we can't for a reason, there's a specific emergency, we're going to be out of town, then by appointment, then a committee member can be. Me personally, if it's not, like Ryan said, if it's seamless and easy, I have no problem with the public participating by Zoom. I'm more concerned about us participating by Zoom. I just don't think it's necessary anymore. That's my thought.
Dennis?
Thank you. My only question would be, is there any, if a person, say, is out of town, out of state, I've been at meetings where people have been in Alaska and have been part of a meeting. And I mean, even some people could be out of the country. Is there any limits that we're looking at that? About somebody how many miles should they be from the meeting? I mean, is that still okay, or how does that work? May not be a problem. I'm just wondering if it could be. Go ahead.
From a technology standpoint, it really doesn't matter as long as they have the bandwidth necessary to connect to the meeting. From any other standpoint, I can't really talk to or speak to that. I think that would be a Sushil question. But yeah, as long as they have the bandwidth necessary to connect to the meeting and have their video and audio conferencing available, there's nothing from my standpoint that would, yep.
Tom?
I guess my first reaction would be to not have it. I see the reason that we went to it, and it had to do with the pandemic, which made sense. Otherwise, I don't know that we would have met. But anyway, and this item's is for discussion. My fear is that it becomes part of the norm. And I feel that it's important for not only the elected officials and members of commissions and that to make that effort to attend, but I think it's also important that the public make that effort to attend. As you can see at our meetings that it has dwindled and dwindled to almost nothing, except for when something might be triggering a group to show up. So that we have to be transparent is somewhat of a fallacy, because people don't tune in anyway, and they can't hear. Dean's right. We have a very, very poor audio system as far as what goes out to the public. Unless you speak directly into this microphone, doesn't pick up or speak loud enough. I think it is worthy for the discussion. My fear is, also has been, and for years, of people going up north on vacation to sit around the campfire and then tuning in to us at a council meeting. And it's happened. Happens to be that it become part of the job, that you run for the job, that you take these jobs. And if vacations have to be worked around the job, then vacations have to be worked around the job. Now, there may be exceptions, which there is, I think, to almost everything. If somebody's called away for a funeral or something like that. But again, my fear is that it becomes part of the norm. And I think they just had today that the CDC dropped all restrictions or something like that was on the news. So does that mean we can all huddle up close together? I ain't going to go that far, but I think we still keep distance and whatever. At least I will, or try to.
We don't get to snuggle.
But I think we're progressing, but every day then you look at something else. So, if something else is going to drop out of the sky, that another pandemic or something, nothing's going to surprise me the way things have been going. So I think we got to be available to roll with the punches, as they say. But I just think that for people to show, to get to the meetings, and I ain't saying you have to be to 100% of them, there are, you know, the committees that we're on or commissions that we're on, that type of thing. Try to get to other ones in that, to find, you know, to follow up what's going on, very important. And it is showing on TV, as far as that goes. But it is hard to follow. It is. I think it was better years ago. I don't know what has gone on. So that's my probably initial $0.02 worth, I guess. You know, and I guess I think it's that, again, with that is some of the meetings then have a closed session in that, as far as, you know, that can be done, I believe, too, with also with in Zoom land, just what by the certain people, not to everybody, just be who would be, I think, qualified to receive it and be on it. But so I think it's worth the discussion. You know, maybe times have changed. Maybe I'm slow picking up on it or something. But I just think it's important that everybody try to, as much as possible, to show up. And I agree with that. If you know if there are extenuating circumstances, that the opportunity would be there. I do agree with that. But it just seems that the more we get to that remote way of doing things, is that we become less, it just seems, I don't know what the word is, less involved with the public. Even though I guess we could be there on TV land or whatever, it just seems like we don't have that personal touch communication. So it's my thoughts, I guess, and that's it. I guess I'd leave it go at that and see where we go. So thanks.
Thank you. Mayor?
Yeah, I guess you'll hear it first, but I'm planning on sending an email out for September's council meeting that will bring department heads back to council meetings, unless it's clear that there's nothing for them on that meeting agenda, and or if there's an excuse. But I think it's time that, you know, they're here participating, willing to answer your questions if you have them. You know, that kind of stopped through the COVID, and it's time. So I just want to let you know that will be happening.
Thank you. Matt?
You know, I understand what you're saying, Tom, especially just about, you know, teaching the next generations to be able to communicate face to face as well as on social media and, you know, phone to phone or whatever. But the reality is that is the future. I mean, unless something drastically changes, it's only going to get more and more in terms of, you know, their ability to communicate. And you know, we're looking at it from a different perspective. We're all older. We'll just leave it at that. And we are. And I understand that. But yeah, but I think at the same time, we want to set ourselves up for the future to the degree that we're not behind in technology and the things that we need and the ability to interact with people from around the other side of the world. You know, we're losing some big industry here, and we're going to have to develop new businesses in order to keep us, you know, the community going and thriving. And I think a lot of those businesses are going to be, you know, worldwide businesses, even here. And it's because of the electronics and the ability to communicate with the other side of the world as fast as we can right now. So I think we should hold that door open, and if we need to put in you know, something of an abuse thing where we feel like one of the members or council or whoever is just, you know, not coming because they can do it that way, I think we should say that first priority is to be here together as a council. And then if you're able to remote from a vacation, if you have time to do it, you know, or something like that. But yeah, if you're sitting at home around your fire and you're on your phone zooming in for the meeting, I don't think that would make sense, you know. So I think there could be a way to just put that in for us, that first priority is to be here in person. And then we should also work on making sure that if they're going to Zoom in, they have proper audio and video to use. And then we should make sure we have proper audio and video, which I believe we do. If we don't, we should get it so that everybody can actually hear what's, being said when they're talking. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, one thing I guess I forgot to mention is that I think Dean might have mentioned it, I'm not sure if he did, but anyway, Ryan, I know a couple months ago, or a few months ago, had somebody, I believe you did, had somebody appear by Zoom for one of the issues that we had, and we've had other people appear by Zoom and that type, those type of things I think would be, I don't have a problem with. Instead of making somebody come, in your case, I think it was Superior or something, or Milwaukee to drive up for maybe a 10-minute presentation, or whatever, 20-minute presentation or whatever, to appear by Zoom, and as long as we could, it was clear in that we could understand, that'd be fine. My thing is that, the people here that we make the effort to appear as often as we can. So, if the need, or if we find somebody that has a specialty in something that lives in Georgia, that would be willing to, chime in with their views on something, and if it was okay with the council, that I wouldn't have a problem with them doing that instead of us having maybe to pick up a airfare bill and whatever else to get them to come up here, but just do it by Zoom. So that's why I think it's worth the discussion, and maybe. So thank you.
Dean?
Yeah, I was just also going to say, and I agree with that, definitely for presentations and such, non-voting members, but not that local government and national government isn't completely different, but still to this day, on a national basis, votes must be in person. They still haven't done remote yet. So it's kind of interesting that for some reason with the technology that the federal government has and state and local governments, they still have to be in person. That was one of the things they talked about this bill yesterday. If one person tested positive on one of the sides of that 50-50 vote they had in national yesterday, it went to work because you can't vote remotely. And that happened a lot during COVID. They didn't get the votes that they wanted because people weren't in person. So apparently there's a reason why we do this be in person. And I just think it's easier to look the rest of us in the eyes when we're talking about these issues rather than through a screen that's fairly small and then divided into smaller sub-screens. I just think that it's our job to be here. And so, yeah, unless it's in extenuating circumstances, that's still my thoughts. And I guess that seems like that's the thoughts on larger government bases as well. Thanks.
So I'll throw my 2 cents in, I guess. I do agree with, we'll start with Ryan. I think everybody had great points, but Ryan's point to the public, I guess my only question would be is if we give them the ability to make an appointment, if you have an issue or whatever, I just think about sometimes the people that come here have a single issue and end up sitting here, their issue maybe at the end of the meeting, and sit through 2 hours of, I mean, we've all seen it happen. But I do like the appointment. I guess my only question with the appointment would be, who would you make the appointment with? I think it's important that we're together in person. I agree with that. I still prefer this. Zoom meetings are hard with the interruptions. It's just tough. So I guess that's my 2 cents. Anybody have anything else? We're not looking for any action on this tonight, Sue, correct?
No, I assume maybe more discussion at council perhaps, or I guess the bottom line is, do we, if you're contemplating in any form that a governing body member can appear by Zoom, then that's going to need to be crafted in a policy, and whether it's, very restrictive that it has to be with permission of the so-and-so under extenuating circumstances, or what have you. But I guess, I didn't.
So-and-so.
Well, it could be the chair of the committee. Let's say if it was a finance meeting, maybe the chair would have to say yes. You get approval ahead. So and so's not, or whatever. whoever, I don't even know if it's on finance, so-and-so can't be there and I'm requesting to appear by Zoom, and if the chair says that's okay, then that governing body member can appear by Zoom, and that person would count as a quorum, that person would vote and participate. Because it's either, I hear what you're all saying. It seems like you're saying, for the most part, no, but in some circumstances, well, then we have to, what are those circumstances and what triggers that and how is that going to work? And so that's what's going to need to be in the policy. And then regarding the presenters or people with things on the agenda, do they then need to get, coordinate approval through the clerk's office or something to appear by Zoom? And then the public can always pop up on Zoom, but they're always going to be muted, right? Because we can't just have everybody, talking or their dogs barking or whatever in the background. So, and they can't really participate if they're on Zoom unless we know ahead of time. So they're just watching, which is basically the majority of people watch on Facebook. They don't, call up here, or they aren't on Zoom unless they're probably participating in the meeting somehow. So, but yeah, I just, I guess to get the discussion started, but I think sooner rather than later, just to kind of think of what that might look like in terms of the future, specifically with governing body members and then, obviously others, so.
Anybody have anything else to add? Ryan?
I just want to reiterate that I think it would be a shame to not allow folks to Zoom in that don't have the ability to be at these meetings in person. I agree. For the voting members, they should be making every chance to attend these meetings. But things happen. People go on vacation. People get sick. And to take the voice away from the constituents that an alderperson represents because they can't physically be here just doesn't sit well with me. So I think making every effort to keep this an option, but like Sue stated, maybe use some permissions and things like that, I think that's what I would support.
Anybody else? So no action on this tonight then.
Okay.
We all good with that? Okay. Moving on then to item number 6. Discuss temporary alcohol licenses and their requirements under state law as it relates to recent requests for temporary alcohol licenses.
Yeah, so the clerk and I have been talking about this over the past several months. And we've talked to the Department of Revenue, agents, and we've had quite a few requests for temporary picnic licenses, and I think we've given you just a kind of a copy of what that application looks like. And these are called picnic licenses, and they're temporary, obviously, for premises that aren't usually licensed. And it's really, it's pretty specific on what the organizations are that can get them. And it's pretty, it's, I shouldn't say specific, but it does say then these are for picnics or similar gatherings. So I think as a council and probably as administration and the clerk, I think we've probably been pretty liberal with allowing these licenses because, they've been pretty infrequent for the most part for most of the organizations that come to us. I know some cities pretty much, if anyone wants one, they give it to them. Some cities are very restrictive in terms of, the letter of the law and who can get them or not, or what types of organizations can get them. But I think we're probably in between or maybe a little more liberal or have been. But we have a requester that is kind of turning, I think, their business into kind of an entertainment venue with concerts and open mics and things like that, and is asking for multiple temporary licenses in a few weeks, or within a month, let's say maybe 3 or 4, and that really isn't in my opinion, and I believe in the opinion of the Department of Revenue, that it really isn't a picnic or a kind of a one-time grand opening event or something that you might request a temporary license for. Those are really scheduled events that are kind of part of their business model now, and so it's like they want to have alcohol at all their events, so they're asking for a lot of licenses. So, and the other part of that is whether they would even be entitled to any licenses because of the nature of their business, and whether they are specifically, one of the organizations listed, which has to be a club, a veterans organization, a church, a fair association or agricultural society, a lodge or society, and a chamber of commerce or similar civic or trade organization. And for most, we don't have an issue. There's a church that, wants a church picnic. There's the Chamber of Commerce does allow their after-hours temporary licenses. So those aren't an issue, but then there are others that, that are businesses that are coming in, and they're nonprofits asking for these licenses. So I guess we just wanted to have a kind of a general discussion of that, and this would probably be starting at the next license that we get, we wanted to just be aware that, I don't think that it's appropriate for, a continuing event or something that's not like a kind of an isolated picnic or grand opening, or, maybe a once every 3 or 4 month event. And I've talked to the DOR, and they've agreed that those events probably, wouldn't be considered appropriate. And as I said, it's really up to your interpretation, though. I mean, that's what the state law is. But the bottom line is, with the state, they're going to say, well, but your local municipality is the one that gives the license. So it's really up to their interpretation and such. So I don't know if Jennifer wanted to say any more. I guess this is probably going to go to finance, the next license that we get. And we have made a couple of the organizations aware that we've we've kind of been generous in our interpretation, but at some point when these are just coming in multiples every month, and as I said, kind of turning it into an entertainment venue, it's really not fair to the real license holders that get these licenses and pay for them, and have to pay a lot of money for them, and have to have certain rules, year-round regarding their premises. And then a nonprofit can come in and just, say, oh, I'm going to have 4 events this month, and I want a picnic license, and kind of, turn their business into kind of a retail alcohol establishment. So that's kind of where we're at. I mean, that's kind of based on the law. It's not, as I said, I think some cities are pretty liberal, some cities aren't. I think the DOR's advice is to be, if you really look at the letter of the law, there's probably a lot of license issued that shouldn't be across the state. But so we just kind of bring it up as something that we've talked about with the organizations. And so when new licenses come, there might be further discussion on this, depending on the organization and the event that they're requesting. And right, and the other thing, these organizations might say, well, then okay, we want a full-time license. Well, first off, we only have one of them, and I don't know if you want to give it to a business that's not really using it full-time. And secondly, they wouldn't qualify for a license because of the business that they have now cannot be on the same premises as an alcohol license premises. So those are restricted to only certain businesses. So So I guess we just thought we'd put it on the agenda and let you know kind of our thoughts on it. And when it comes to council, the next license comes to council, depending on who requests it and what it's for, that we may have that discussion. Again, there's really nothing that needs to be changed in our ordinances because it's all state law that sets forth these licenses. So we don't need to restrict it or enhance it in any way. It's just more the interpretation of the ordinance.
Jennifer, you want to add anything before we open the floor?
I think Sue covered it pretty well. The one thing that I do know one of the businesses wanted to get a regular Class B license and they don't qualify. So the temporary license is kind of a way around that. And that's something that we shouldn't be giving out a temporary license because they can't get a regular Class B license. So I just wanted to make that. I agree with Sue that according to what, I've also talked to the Department of Revenue about this, and, it is up to you, but I think we need to take a closer look at these when they come to finance. If I put it on the agenda, basically, it's my recommendation that they've met all the qualifications, but I think Sue and I have discussed that. Do they really meet these qualifications? So we've had several discussions with the Department of Revenue on it. So that's all I've got, I think.
Thank you. Matt?
So just to clarify for myself, they don't qualify for any of the permanent licenses.
That's correct. You
Okay.
can't have it, the selling or serving of alcohol would have to be a regular part of their business.
Okay. And then they don't qualify, you called it a temporary, but you called it picnic.
It's the same thing.
Same
It's
thing.
basically for picnics or gatherings.
Okay.
But the official name of it is the temporary Class B retailer's license. So picnic license is fine.
Okay, so we're saying that if we say that they don't continue to qualify for these, then they would no longer be, we would, basically, they just wouldn't be able to do what they've been doing.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, one thing I thought of is, maybe there's, and I'm not conceding that they are even eligible for a picnic license, I guess but, maybe a limit, like, they have 5 in a year or 6 in a year, and those are, so then it's more, okay, they're isolated events, they're not continual, so the max that someone could get, in that year is so many, and then they're not getting, 40 in a year, or, they're not getting 40 in a year, but, so, we're not supposed to limit them, we can only limit wine to 4 in a year, I think,
Wine is 2.
or 2 in a year, and we are not supposed to be able to limit beer, but I guess if we're willing to maybe stretch it a little bit to give them something, they probably would be okay with a limit. But I guess I'm not necessarily conceding that, but that's, something to talk about. They may truly have an event that's more of a, a couple a year, 3 or 4 a year that would qualify. So, but maybe not the continual concerts, bands, every weekend type thing.
Is there anybody that's complaining about it, or is it like there's unfair competition, or is it more internal in the city right now, just wondering if this is what we should continue to allow?
I would say, I think others have noticed it and wondering why they can't, can we do this too? It's like, well, really, you can't. And there are probably organizations that absolutely don't qualify. I mean, it's not even a close question, but they see this happening, and then we question, well, okay, are we really doing the right thing here in terms of these licenses? And I think it's something that municipalities do talk about and struggle with, but I can't say that someone said, okay, well, this isn't fair, or, but.
So it kind of
Unless
sounds
someone
like
can
a little bit of a one-off, like we don't run into this ever, we haven't really run into something like this before.
I would say that, right, just recently with, particularly one organization asking for a lot of these has brought it to the forefront.
Yep.
And then I think other organizations seeing that and coming in and asking, and those organizations, why can't we do that type thing? But no complaints specifically saying, hey, they're too
Yeah.
loud, or they shouldn't be let, it's more just people questioning, and then us having to differentiate between them and other people and doing that analysis, so.
Have we talked to them about changing their business model to where it would qualify for the permanent one?
Well, I think we've had conversations. This is not a surprise to them that, our concern over the number of them that they've been asking for, and that this might come to a head in terms of, determining really what's appropriate going forward. And I think, definitely can have that conversation with them. They have new leadership, or will be having new leadership, so right now it's kind of, I'm not sure, and maybe the change in leadership might change things to the relationship there, but.
So as in regards to the business model part of it, the Department of Revenue has very specific rules and guidelines on what that business needs to look like. So for them to, are you talking about for a regular Class B license?
Yeah, if they, basically if whatever that looks like, if
Yeah.
they somehow defined what a business should look like, then can they conform their business to look more like that model?
Their business would have to be a tavern or a restaurant, which is not what they are. So.
Isn't that just, I know this isn't your call, but isn't that just, like, lingo, or it's just certain words, right?
You
Like-
can't just set up a couple of tables and serve a couple sandwiches. You have to have, so much of your receipts from your business has to be from the sale of food or alcohol. So it's not, these licenses are not meant so that you can have an event every weekend. They're meant for taverns and restaurants so that they can serve alcohol. So the regular Class B license was not put in place for any business out there to be able to serve. And again, as Sue said, you would be taking that license then away from a qualified business that is in business just to be a tavern or just to be a restaurant that wants to serve alcohol.
Well, I guess that's my point, is they would have to figure out how to become a restaurant or tavern as well as put on their shows and do all this stuff in order to get the
Yeah,
permanent license.
and that's
what
not the
I was thinking.
basis of their business. They're
Right,
not,
right.
they're not in the food industry. So I see what you're saying.
Mhm.
I'm not
Because
sure
we have two things, and they don't fit into either one of them.
right.
So in the end, the state maybe wants to,
Yeah.
we should have a
Yeah,
talk with the state.
well,
and
there
see
are-
maybe
yeah,
we should create
it's-
another avenue.
It can be hotel, restaurant, grocery store and tavern, sporting goods store, tavern, bowling center, a club, society, or lodge that's been in existence for 6 months, a movie theater. So, those are the car dealership can't come in and get a license to sell beer, right? Because that's, you can't have it on the same premises. So, but a hotel can, and you can have a sporting goods store and sell beer on the premises and get a license, but not, so.
So what do they fall under? What category do they fall under? Are we trying not to talk about the people that want this?
No, I'm just saying they're not any of these, so.
They're
They're
a
just not- so they
nonprofit
don't have it.
organization.
Yeah.
They're a
don't have it.
nonprofit.
Okay.
They're not, so when you're looking at the picnic license requirements, they don't really fall under any of those. They're just a nonprofit. As far as giving a regular Class B license, again, it has to be, well, some of those would fall under Class A as well. Class B is where the alcohol is consumed on premises. So like a convenience store or grocery store, they would sell the alcohol to be consumed off premises.
Right.
So you have two different types of licenses. This alcohol is consumed on premises. So
So Jennifer, what would have, for Whitterfield, or that we just approved one for the Quadplex, what do those fall under?
Those are sports complexes.
Yeah, those are that's a separate,
The theater is allowed to sell alcohol.
Movie
That has
theater.
come up. People have questioned why can they serve it and we can't? We've had questions regarding, that's kind of how this came up. It wasn't even just the number of the licenses, but why are they qualified and we're not? Well, taking a look at it, are they really qualified? And I think that's the big question. Are they actually qualified to have a picnic license? So
I think Sue touched on it, coming up with a number that we think is fair for these type of events and imposing that. I think I know the culprit here, and, you know, there's a lot of great things going on there and really good things for the community as well. So you have to weigh the two, right? So a fair number, something that would, you know, is set, I think would be a good path forward.
I guess the only thing I would add is, I think we do know who the culprit is here, and there's nothing saying that they have to serve alcohol at those events.
Right.
So,
that's correct. And I think that the question that I have posed is, do they actually qualify to hold a picnic license? It's not even just the number of them, of licenses that we issue. It's, do they actually qualify under state law?
but if I understood Sue, that's going to be up to us, pretty much, right? So,
well, yeah, are they a bona fide club? Are they a chamber of commerce? I mean, you know, I guess it's questionable, at most, at best.
no,
But,
I
I
think
mean, they're
I'd like-
incorporated, and just because they're a nonprofit does not make them eligible. And it's, you know, these are pretty specific things here. But, yeah, I mean, I think we'll talk about this some more internally, and then maybe have, talk to the group and see, you know, make some recommendations.
Well, I think I agree that we can probably talk about numbers and maybe not every weekend, so. Matt?
The only downside to that is then the door's open for all these other people that are saying, why can't I do that?
Good
So
point.
it's a little slippery there.
Okay. Anybody have anything else? If not, we will move on to item number 7, discuss a referral from Alderperson Stevenson regarding department heads providing reports to common council and department heads reporting to a committee. Alderman Stevenson is not here this evening. Anybody else care to speak to it?
I could just say, I mean, in terms of department heads providing reports to council, I think that's probably more of a mayoral directive versus, you know, council in terms of requirements of department heads. You know, but on the other hand, if the council as a whole says, you know, at the end of each meeting, we'd like to hear from, you know, each department. I guess that was okay. It would be okay. I don't think it really would be a valid directive. I guess it would be more voluntary. And I guess reporting to department heads, reporting to a committee. You know, this, I think what Ms. Evanson probably is more familiar with is how the county is set up, where they do actually have committees that that certain departments have more of a reporting relationship to, and that's really not how the mayoral and council form of government is set up. The mayor is the chief executive, and department heads report to the mayor, and we don't report to committees, or department heads don't report to committees. So, you know, that it would kind of, you know, be antithetical to really how the city is set up. I'm not saying that it could not happen. I guess I probably wouldn't advise it, because it'd be very, I think, difficult. I guess, and I don't know what she means by reporting to a committee. Is it just reading a report to a committee, or is there some supervisory relationship there or some accountability? But I guess those are my thoughts.
I guess the only thing I'll add to that is, one, I believe already that in the case of Public Works, engineering's already, and streets, go ahead, it does Park and Rec? No, not to you guys?
Jake is usually at the Park and Rec. Yep.
Yeah.
Staff reports at the end of every.
Yep, and police and fire, we get the police and fire commission's report every month. I think our bigger departments already are reporting. I guess the question to a department like yours, Sue, do you want to do a monthly report? And how much of that work is confidential besides that? So,
Well, I'm elected, so.
you got out of it? Jennifer, you're off the hook.
But if everyone else has to do one, I would do one. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. To some extent, especially it might even be HR or, that we worked on, and have to redact it or not to get into much detail, but, and I think it takes time to do that, and maybe people's time is spent better in other ways for certain departments, but
Go ahead, Tyler.
Thank you. As one of the only departments that doesn't have a committee, IT, I think my preference would be to go upstream to my supervisor, which would be the mayor, give him kind of a rundown of activities and tasks, and if he deems it necessary to then inform council at that, at a council meeting or whatever, then that would be the time. The rest of the departments, largely, you've already covered, have a committee or someone that they're continuously talking to. I think IT is about the only one. Planning and zoning gets community development. The clerk's office is the other one that is not.
She's elected too.
I know.
I'm
but
elected, but
there-
also,
There's an office, there's more than one.
however,
Yeah.
the majority of my items are reported on finance and property,
Yeah,
except for the elections.
So, again, my preference would be kind of to go upstream to my direct supervisor and then have him filter out what's necessary or not, because I like to talk a lot, so.
Good.
Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Ryan, did you have something?
So Mayor Blazer touched on it. He's directing the department heads to attend their relevant committee meetings, and I believe he mentioned common council as well. I guess clarification on that, but I can see the point. Things come up during a council meeting, and the appropriate heads aren't necessarily in the room all the time. And if they are indeed going to make an effort to attend and be here, especially with anything that's relevant, I feel like that takes care of this issue.
I agree. Matt?
Yeah, when Sherry first started talking about this, I kind of chimed in and agreed with her. I think her take on what she was saying and what I was understanding her to say was a little bit different. And I can't speak for her. So for myself, what I was hearing her say was just more of a, and more through the mayor, I guess, and just to hear some of the good stuff that's happening. I wouldn't want details. I wouldn't want to micromanage any more than is already being done with the committees that are there. So I agree that that's enough in that sense. If there are good things that are happening, I would like to hear them because, we get to deal with all the, not so fun stuff, but to hear some of the fun stuff that's going on and progress that's being made or challenges that we face, I wouldn't, that's what I was kind of agreeing to at that time. But no, I don't agree to any further, in-depth management of the committees or the departments and things.
Anybody have anything else to add? I'm guessing we're not going to take action on this tonight, so if there's nothing else, we will move on to item number 8. Discuss a referral from Alderperson Stevenson to create an aquatics ad hoc committee to focus on all aspects relating to the aquatic center. And she's here not to speak to that, but anybody else have anything they'd like to add to it or speak?
I'm totally opposed to this. I think that that is the absolute purpose of the Parks and Rec Commission is to focus on all aspects of the aquatic center. And since we talked earlier in tonight's meeting about the fact that that the council still holds the purse strings, that things still have to, the financial end of it still has to come before council. I don't think that we need to continue to override the purpose of, or the planning, or the Parks and Rec Commission itself. I know at the recent Parks and Rec Commission, this was brought up, and a number of the commissioners said, basically, what the heck are we for then? It's the biggest asset that the Parks and Rec Commission is responsible for, and we have commissioners that are appointed that have expertise outside of what we do as elected officials, and I think that's the whole point of that. So I'm opposed to any committee doing what we already have a commission to do. That's my thoughts.
Brian?
I'll agree with Dean on this one, and say, you know, alderpersons have the opportunity to attend these park and rec meetings. If they have something relevant they want to discuss, that would be a great time.
Matt?
Oh,
You
sorry.
want to throw something out there before?
I was
Matt
just going to
comes in?
say that, yeah, I think with the Park and Rec ordinance going to council, and I think that probably, you know, takes care of some of maybe the issues, and then that will be when that ordinance is discussed in terms of who oversees what. I think that'll probably all get flushed out, and then her issues can, you know, be part of the ordinance, you know, or if there's something that needs to be addressed in an ordinance or so on. But I agree that the committee probably is not necessary, especially since we did the ordinance that really lays out who does what, and as long as the council agrees with that, then that should take care of it.
Matt?
I think, I again, can't speak for Sherry. For myself, I think we're all pretty curious to see how the whole aquatic center flushes out in terms of how much it costs to build it, how much it costs to maintain it, and how much money it's actually bringing in, and, you know, what that's all about. And I'm assuming that was kind of part of this, but all that information is there. I don't think we need another committee in order to figure that out. I think we just do our due diligence on it, and we're going to learn over time. Thanks.
I agree. I think it kind of seems like we're trying to micromanage some of our commissions and committees now, and I think if you ask the mayor, it's hard enough to get people interested and involved in some of those things, so I'm in full agreement with everything that's been said. Does anybody else have any comments, Dennis or Tom?
No, not really, but my experience when the ad hoc committee, they don't have any authority anyway. They're there mainly just to get facts, and then they would still have to come back to the Park and Rec and tell them what their findings would be. I agree with everybody here. I don't think it's needed in this case. I don't think you need an ad hoc committee.
Thank you. I guess that's the end of the agenda. I don't know if I can do this or not, Sue, but I'm just going to throw out the question that should we be, this committee consider scheduling a quarterly meeting? If we don't have to meet, we can always cancel it, but is that something we should consider?
Yeah, I think we should put something on the books, and if there's nothing relevant to discuss, then we'll push to the next.
Matt?
I agree.
All right. Should we pick a date tonight, or?
So what would we be looking at, like one more meeting this year, or two?
I think so. I think we can schedule something. If something comes up in between, we can always meet again, but I just think it's important that, you know, it's been 9 months since this group has met, so, Tom?
Yeah, on, turning to the handout that we got here, and where it lists the committees and that, it lists the legislative committee as a standing committee. And years ago, legislative used to be. 3 through whatever, and I just can't remember when or why. Some committees' names got changed and whatnot, and some disappeared, I guess. But I think to be a standing committee or whatever, there should be duties for what this committee does. I mean, is it just going to exist because of when for ordinance to go through and get cleared, or other things that we had on this evening? You know, are all of those that we had there this evening for legislative? So I think it's worthy of a discussion at some time to what does the committee do? But I think it's also that I didn't check before I just came, but I don't believe legislative exists as a standing committee. And if that's what we want, that would have to be somehow gone through a referral process, probably ordinance and that or whatever, to become a standing committee. And then that would be, at that point in time, I think, would be to determine, you know, with what their duties are, or what there is, of how often you're going to meet. You know, it could be, I'm not saying it is, but other standing committees meet monthly. Would that be, not knowing what their duties all are, I can't say. So that I think is something that should be addressed, of what duties, if we're going to have an official legislative committee, what the duties would be, and that I think should come to the council, that's a written request for the council to adopt it as a formal committee of, and what their duties are, and I guess by what the duties are, it can be determined how often they'd meet, if it's quarterly or whatever, or every other month or whatever, or as the need arises. So it's just, I guess, some thoughts that I had, and I have had. It's been mentioned about legislative and that, and we formed a committee, but I don't think we made it official as a standing committee, to my recollection anyway. So if that's the intent, I think we should go through the official process of making it that. And who makes up the legislative committee, I don't have a problem with how that's being done. The chair of the different committees, that makes sense. I think that's what was done years ago. So it's just, I guess, food for thought, just to think about, I think, because it's I guess, how official do we want to make this? To be part of the standing committee, I would think we'd have to take some more action to do that.
So,
Maybe I'm wrong.
maybe Sue can answer some
Yeah,
of that.
it actually is a standing committee. We changed the ordinance. Standing committee responsibilities, there's finance and property, human resources, public works, and then it says legislative committee. Legislative committee is responsible for general legislative recommendations which are not directly related to the areas of responsibility of the other three standing committees. And then it says that time of committee meetings that Public Works, Finance, and HR meet once per month, and it doesn't say anything about legislative. And then it says legislative committee shall be comprised of the chairpersons of the other three standing committees. So it is listed right under the standing committees. That's how it was set up originally, so.
Matt?
So you're saying it doesn't have I'm assuming standing committee means that it's always there, but in terms of how often it meets, there's nothing that states how
there's
often
not.
it meets? So is that if we did want to do this, is it just on an informal quarterly basis?
I would
Because-
say probably more informal, unless you wanted it to have the force of an ordinance. You could change, or you could add that in the ordinance, but
So then
probably
informally,
be okay to be
I
informal.
agree. yeah, informally, I'm agreeing to a quarterly if we want to set it up, as we are the legislative committee right now, right?
Right, and I guess as I'm thinking about this, I think there were several ordinances that weren't quite ready that should be ready
Yeah,
within the next month.
Kyle had a couple, and I don't recall what they were, and I don't know why they weren't zoning or planning, otherwise he would take them there, but, yeah, he had a couple that he wasn't able to get on for this, so I'm thinking he wants some meeting probably, I think he assumed maybe within a month or so, maybe you would meet again. But I don't think it was anything that was super urgent, but I can't recall what the,
So, Ryan?
So, I mean, in my mind, this is a committee that, meets as the need arises, right? Maybe it's not wise to put dates to it, and maybe it is. I guess I'm still tossing it.
Redistricting was separate, no, yeah, you're right, yep. So anyways, I just don't, it's tough to schedule anything in the summertime. I think we've bounced this around a little bit. And I do know that Kyle has some stuff coming up, and I guess it's up to the group. I don't want to meet just for the sake of meeting. I don't want to schedule a meeting just for the sake of scheduling one. So, Matt, go ahead.
I just think that if we set them once a quarter, whatever that looks like, then those who need to set something up to put in front of the legislative committee, then they have a date to shoot for. And if by the time we're entering that date, there's nothing on it, then we cancel it. But like Kyle, I think if Kyle knew we were having this meeting ahead of, 4 months ago, he might have shot to get it on there instead of waiting for the next, 8 months. Or not, I'm not saying that right, 3 months or 6 months. So I still think it's possible that setting them up would be good for, organizational purposes. And if there's nothing on it, then we don't meet for the future.
I can agree with that.
All right, so should we schedule something for before the end of the year, knowing that Kyle or somebody may have something and we may end up meeting before then?
Yes.
All right, and do we want to do that tonight, or?
Sure.
I mean, so set something up and then Kyle can, or do we talk to Kyle about when he's going to be ready?
Well, I think we all realize that there may be things that come up in between that are maybe a little more urgent than every quarter, and we may have to meet in between, which is,
Right.
is okay. But your point, you made a good point. That it would give in planning's situation, it would give him something to shoot for, knowing that on this date, if I've got anything, if I have it ready, they'll be ready to go. So.
Yeah, and as a member of the legislative committee, if we have to meet outside of those meetings, I'm happy to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
So what are we thinking, a couple months or
Sure.
a month? So October or September?
How about October's fine with me. Yeah.
Second week? Same day?
Thursday
Thursday?
afternoon, that works.
Yep.
4 o'clock.
Yeah. You'll pick me up, Jay?
If you need a ride, I told you I'd be more than happy to come and get you.
Thank you.
So tentatively, October 13th at 4 o'clock.
Yep.
And I guess with that, if there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Oh,
Motion
sorry.
and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 5:32.